All right, Andrew, is it okay if I go ahead and get this party started?
Let's go for it.
All right, awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. If you're on the East Coast, I should say. If you're on the West Coast, good morning. Thanks for being here for today's Bloomerang webinar, Maximizing Mid-Level Giving. And my name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the Chief Engagement Officer over here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get going here. Just want to let you all know that we are recording this session, and we'll send you the recording as well as slides later on this afternoon. So if you have to leave early, or maybe if you get interrupted over the next hour or so, or if you just want to review the content later on, don't worry. We'll get all that good stuff in your hands. Just look for an email from me later on today. But most importantly, use that chat box right there on your webinar screen. We're going to save some time at the end for Q&A, so don't be shy about sending in your questions and comments. We like for these sessions to be as interactive as possible. I'll be keeping an eye out for those throughout the hour. I'll keep an eye on Twitter as well if you want to send us some tweets. Just use @BloomerangTech or the Bloomerang hashtag. And last thing, if you have any trouble hearing us through your computer speakers, we find that the audio by phone is usually a little bit better. So if you've got a phone nearby, and if you don't mind dialing in, if that'll be comfortable for you, try that before you totally give up on us. There's a phone number in the email from ReadyTalk that went out about an hour ago today that you can dial into. And if this is your first Bloomerang webinar, just want to say an extra special welcome to all you folks, all you first-timers. We do these webinars just about every week throughout the year. We only miss a couple weeks. Great presentations. Today is no exception by any means. But what we are most known for is our donor management software. We've got a great donor database. Lots of nonprofits use it. They're all happy. And maybe you might want to join that community. So if you're interested in that, or maybe just kind of want to take a look at what we have to offer, check out our website. You can even download a quick video demo and see the software in action. But don't do that right now, because you all are in for a real treat. We've got a friend of the program joining us. Great topic. Great guy, Andrew Olsen. How's it going, Andrew? You doing okay?
Hey, man. I'm happy to be here, excited to jump in.
Yeah, this is great. I've been looking forward to this presentation for a few weeks here. I love mid-level giving. I feel like not enough people talk about it, so I'm super excited to have you tell us all about that particular topic. But I just want to brag on you real quick. If you guys don't know Andrew, got to follow him on Twitter. Check out his books. Got a couple of bestsellers on Amazon in the fundraising category. New book, 101 Biggest Mistakes Nonprofits Make and How You Can Avoid Them. Check that out. Really cool book. He interviewed a lot of the big names in the sector and got some cool stories, sometimes funny stories, sometimes heartbreaking stories, but you'll like that book, I guarantee it. Check it out. Also the author of Rainmaking, The Fundraiser's Guide to Landing Big Gifts. Andrew is a partner over at Newport One, really good direct response agency. They do great work. I can vouch for them as well. So check them out if maybe you need some help with any of the things that Andrew's going to talk about. But Andrew gets around a lot. He speaks at a lot of conferences. He's got a great podcast, the Rainmaker Fundraising Podcast. Check that out on iTunes. Been doing this a long time, almost 20 years, raised lots of money for his clients, and he's going to share some of that knowledge with you right now. So, Andrew, the floor is yours, my friend. Tell us all about mid-level giving. Take it away.
Awesome. Appreciate the introduction. Super excited to be here. This is probably the most favorite topic that I have to talk about. It's the kind of program that I really love to dig into. So hopefully you can get some good value out of this and learn some things that you can implement even as soon as tomorrow for your organization. So we're going to talk about maximizing mid-level giving. And I want to start with what makes a mid-level donor unique, and really who are mid-level donors. And the answer to that often is it really depends. So we find that mid-level donors run the gamut. So organizations typically classify a mid-level donor based on gift level. So you might say a mid-level donor is someone who's given a single gift of $500 or $1,000 or whatever that number is for your organization. Other organizations talk about it at a cumulative level. So it's someone who annually gives $500, $1,000, maybe $2,000. And there's no right or wrong on that. For every organization, it's different. what we typically like to do is say you have a major donor team or officer, depending on the size of your organization, and where that person or group's capacity tops out to handle individual donors in a portfolio is where your mid-level should start. And then from there, you go down to whatever level makes sense for your organization. For some organizations, the minimum gift amount might be $100. For others, it might be $1,000. It really depends on your capacity and how those donors behave with you. The other things that we like to look at are capacity and wealth ratings. And so, interestingly, I was on the phone with Mark Rovner from Sea Change Strategies last week doing a podcast interview, and he shared that a number of organizations now are even doing things to wealth screen and capacity rate their audiences in acquisition before they mail a first package. And what they're doing is once that person gives, if they've already screened high, even if they give $5, that person immediately gets pushed into a mid-level stream so that they're being talked to commensurate with what their long-term capacity is rather than just what their initial gift amount is. So that's another way to identify and sort of screen for people who might have an inclination to become a mid-level donor at some point. And the other thing we like to look at in a donor file is people who are rapid upgraders. So let's say that you've got someone who came on your file at $25, but in 6 months they went to $50 and then $100 gift. So they've doubled their gift and then doubled it again. Those are the kind of people that I'd be looking at and saying, okay, this person is probably likely to be open to a mid-level ask and a mid-level offer if we present it to them. So what makes these donors unique and different? Oftentimes there's two types of donors that fit in the mid-level program. There's people who are stretching. So that's a person who maybe they have to work really hard to be able to afford that $1,000 gift commitment if that's, say, the bottom threshold in a mid-level program at your organization. And then you have other folks, let me back up. So that $1,000 might be the cap. They may give that every year, but they're not likely to, say, go from $1,000 to $5,000 and $5,000 to $10,000. And then you've got the other group of people who are preparing to springboard. So those are people who might come in at a $500 or $1,000 level, but based on the offers that you're presenting them and the opportunities you're giving them to engage with your organization, they might have capacity to do 10 or 20 times that. So really for them, the mid-level space is what they're going to stop at for a moment, but they have the opportunity and the capacity at some point, if you engage them well, to become a major donor. So there's typically two groups that fit in your mid-level program, which does make it a little more challenging to cater to both of them. But the beauty of a mid-level program is it should have that kind of flexibility that allows you to do that and really speak to those donors where they are. Mid-level donors we typically see give fewer larger gifts per year rather than giving a bunch of small gifts. But not always. There are some organizations, and it varies depending on the type of work that you do and the type of fundraising that you do, quite honestly. So I have one client that we work with right now, and the value in their mid-level file comes primarily because their mid-level donors give more gifts on average annually than everybody else on their file, not because they give significantly larger gifts. So this is one of those areas where you want to look at your data and understand. And quite honestly, if you get fewer larger gifts from those donors, then you might want to look at a single gift threshold for setting the bar for your mid-level program. If you get more value because you have a lot of donors who give more cumulative giving, more gifts over time, then maybe a cumulative annual is the way to filter your mid-level program to set that up for success. These donors have what I call an investor mentality. So what I mean by that is they're willing to give small gifts that to use maybe a potentially crass term, but to kick the can on the problem, to help you get through tomorrow or get through next month. But really what they're interested in is finding long-term solutions. So they look at their giving as a mechanism to invest in your organization and the mission that you're trying to accomplish, and they're looking for a long-term return, not just an immediate tomorrow kind of solution there. They like to fund specific projects and programs, not just bigger amounts of what you're doing. So an easy example of that would be like a homeless shelter, right? So if you say that $2.70 provides a meal for someone who's homeless, that's not an offer that's going to resonate with a mid-level donor. They really want to say, well, wait a minute, how can we get how can we fund a job readiness program to get people off the streets, and productive in the workforce? Or how can I provide funds that might go towards transitional housing and provide a real long-term solution rather than just funding, say, more meals. They want more information and more details about program outcomes and about how their gifts are making an impact in whatever community that you serve. So, they are excited by newsletters, they're excited by impact reports, anything that you can do to add granularity and additional context and insights to the work that you're doing with them, the better you'll see returns there. And one thing that I found interesting early on in my career when I was running a mid-level program at a children's hospital is most mid-level donors aren't looking for high recognition publicly. They tend to shy away from things like getting their name on a placard or on a building. They don't often like to even get their names in an annual report. What they're looking for is a more intimate engagement with your organization and having access to leadership and access to program staff so that they can understand how their gifts are being used. But their primary objective is not to become well known through their philanthropy. These are oftentimes some of the quietest philanthropists that you and I have in your program. Let's talk a little bit about the value of a mid-level giving program. I'm going to show you a couple of quick examples of this. So here's 4 really mini case studies on how being intentional around mid-level giving has helped other organizations. So these are all organizations that we work with, and what you can see is that for many of these organizations, they're seeing pretty considerable growth year over year because they've invested in mid-level programs. So for example, a national environmental org saw a 7% lift in revenue growth in mid-donors by soliciting those donors 6 times a year, even while their audience remained flat. So they didn't add people to it, and they saw an average gift growth of 22%. But that's the kind of impact that building a solid mid-level program can have on an organization. Another one had a 27% increase in net revenue from mid-level donors by changing the way that they communicate with those donors and putting together a communication stream that really invested in the donor and gave them the kind of feedback that they need and presented them with the kind of opportunities that they need to really improve their performance. So, there's a couple other examples here. I won't read through all of them, but the point I want to make here is this can often seem like a really big thing to bite off for organizations, and many organizations might say, we just don't think that we can invest in it right now. We don't think that we can spend the staff time or the hard cost dollars to do this, and we'll just keep going with what we're doing. What I would say is that this is a really big lost opportunity if you're not focused on it, and the upside potential is very significant with a mid-level program. The goals that I like to see for a mid-level program, the things that we want to accomplish through building a program and launching like this in any organization would be to give some of your most engaged and most generous donors a more consistent and compelling series of communication throughout the year. So not just direct mail engagement or not just an email engagement, but a really comprehensive multi-touch experience that ties together everything that you do and shows them that they're making a significant impact for whatever kind of work it is that your organization does. You want to be making the case regularly for upgraded giving in the near term, so annually engaging them to increase their giving. And quite honestly, I don't think that it matters whether they give a bigger gift or they just happen to give an extra gift in a year. Simply what you want is to move that donor from whatever level they are today to a little bit more. And whether that's through frequency or gift size, it largely wouldn't matter to me. You want to maximize that relationship with donors who are stretching. So those are the people, again, who, getting to $1,000, that's the threshold for your program, or $2,000, whatever that number is, getting to that level is a stretch for them. And so they're almost, and sometimes might be giving sacrificially to your organization at that level. You want to make sure that you're really maximizing the relationship with those folks. And then for the mid-level donors who might springboard into major gifts, what you really want to do is in that mid-level program, you want to have the building blocks there to help qualify those donors so that you can identify pretty quickly who of those potential springboard donors might actually desire a deeper relationship and might have the inclination to become a major donor. And those are those are often the hallmarks of really successful program. Is it really gives you that opportunity to begin pulling donors from the mid-level up into major gifts as well. And then the other thing is, through everything that you do, the beauty of a mid-level program is it's fewer donors and it's typically fewer contacts, so it offers you an opportunity to be more personalized, to increase the level of recognition and celebration with that donor, and then also to be more sophisticated in your contact. And what I mean by that is rather than maybe half-page solicitation letter that you might send them or a really brief email solicitation, these are the kind of donors where you want to invest to maybe write a 3 or 4-page letter or build a really robust email that drives to a landing page that has a lot more content that you might give than you might give to, say, a $20 donor. Those are the kind of things that you want to be able to check off on a mid-level program to really lead you into a successful execution. So what are the outcomes that we look for in mid-level programs? What we want to see is I want to see more donors moving up into major gifts each year from that mid-level pool. I want to see growth in that mid-level donor program. So if you have 100 donors in it today, how do we get you to 125? How do we get you to 150? Whatever scale your program looks like today, one of those goals is simply to make sure that we're increasing that scale over time. We also want to look at increased annual revenue per donor. So you'll hear me talk about average gift a number of times. You'll hear me talk about frequency of giving a number of times throughout this presentation. But the real benchmark is increased annual revenue per donor. And the reason that's important is that it shouldn't just be about how big is the gift or how frequently do they give, but really almost taking a banker's approach to this and identifying what are the assets under management for each of those donors that give to you. So if you have a mid-level donor who always writes you one check, could we get them to write you 2? Could we get them to attend an event in addition to writing you that check, or to give online in addition to whatever they do elsewhere, so that the total revenue that you're generating from that donor is increasing annually? Regardless of what channel it's coming in or how the donor prefers to give, simply the idea of making sure that we're maximizing the total revenue for that donor every year. Obviously, higher average gifts are important. Another great outcome for successful mid-level programs is increased retention. So when we look at retention rates as a whole in our organization, they often look terrible. Some organizations are even down in the teens or low 20s, which is really bad. But if you unbundle this and you start to look at donors at different levels and different types of donors, we often see that mid-level donors can be, almost as high in retention rate as a monthly sustainer that's on a credit card. So you might have mid-level donors that are retaining at 60, 70, 75%, depending on your program. And a well thought through and well-developed mid-level program can help you deliver on that. Excuse me. And then I think a hallmark of a program like this is making sure that you have a deeper connection with those donors, so they feel like they're an insider, not like they're one of 10,000 or one of 200, depending on the size of your list, but like they're someone who has direct, easy access to your organization and to your leadership, and feels like they're getting information that is not available to the public. It's not accessible to everybody, but that's special for them. Talk a little bit about how successful mid-level giving programs are different from other fundraising activities. So what is it that exactly that mid-level programs that are successful do differently? And the first is that there's broad leadership support, and we measure that by time and investment, meaning if an organization is not willing to allocate a staff member to a mid-level program, or even a part of a staff member to a mid-level program, and they're not willing to invest in some of the tools and techniques that are necessary to do mid-level fundraising well, then there's probably not the kind of leadership support that's needed in order to be successful. But as a follow-up, and part of that is that there's someone who's actually personally responsible for the success of that program. So one of the big mistakes that organizations make with mid-level programs is they say, yes, we're going to do this, we're going to create a program, we're going to put people into a track, and then no one is individually responsible for it. It's either a shared responsibility across an entire development department, or it's something that just sort of falls by the wayside because there's an annual gift person and there's a major gift person, but no one is specifically assigned responsibility for mid-level. So this is one of the hallmarks. Organizations that put a focus on it and put an actual staff member in the driver's seat on a program like this are typically more successful. we see that organizations that have a really strong collaboration between annual giving and major gifts tend to do this better. And the reason for that is that the movement of donors between your annual gift program into major gifts and through mid-level, if you have a mid-level program, can often be confusing. And in fact, one of the other big mistakes that happens is that donors get put into a mid-level track, and then because no one is running the program often, or because the annual and the major gifts teams don't interact well, what we have happen is that mid-level donors just get forgotten. They get put off in the silo, and the annual fund is running and doing its thing, and the major gift program is running and doing its thing, and you have this incredibly valuable group of donors that just gets forgotten about. Their contact frequency drops, no one's engaging them and stewarding them well, and pretty soon what you have is a pretty significant retention rate problem. I've had a couple of clients over the last 20 years who've lost $1 million or more by making this mistake. So it's a significant thing to focus on. And I think if your organization has opportunity to make sure that your annual fund and your major gifts team are connected well and are talking regularly about how they both play a role in the mid-level program to enhance the experience for those donors, that's the best case scenario. They have established business rules around how to make decisions and how to reduce confusion. And often what this is related to is where a donor sits in a portfolio, whether they're part of the annual fund program, whether they're part of a defined mid-level program, whether mid-level is run by major gifts, how we decide to make changes in those programs so that we're honoring donor expectations and we're not taking, say 30, 60, 90 days to make decisions about, well, who's going to send out a receipt when a new donor comes on at this level, or who's going to be the person to reach out to that donor over the phone to thank them, things like that. If your business rules aren't set up well in advance, those things fall by the wayside, and that impacts retention and really sours the donor experience. We see that organizations that are most successful with mid-level make a concerted investment in unique experiences. So there's a couple of organizations. In fact, there's a gentleman named Randy Shaw, who's a development officer at Mercy Ships now, and used to head up development at a Nashville Rescue Mission. He was a good friend of mine, and one of the things that he did that was unique when it started was, years ago, when he first got his iPhone, he would send a video. He just recorded a 20-second thank you video when he got a significant gift from a mid-level donor and email it out to them so that they got something that was a little more exciting than a standard receipt letter or a standard email response. And just simply that, 20-second video, hey, Mary and Jim just got your gift. So grateful. I don't think you know it, but we're going to be able to use that gift to buy this new piece of kitchen equipment for the shelter or something like that, right? That kind of payoff for the donors is really meaningful, and he found pretty quickly that donors fell in love with that. So that's now something that is used all across the organization that he's with now. And those kind of things where it's just a unique and different experience, right? Some organizations, I was with a couple of folks last week who said that they're going to go out and deliver cookies. They're a regional organization, so all of their donors are right in their area, and they have the benefit of being able to go local. But they're going to go deliver homemade cookies to a number of their mid-level donors, simply to make sure that they're upping the engagement and delivering value to those donors in a way that's different probably from what every other organization is doing to steward them. So, the list is long and could get really creative around the unique experiences, but if you really want to do this well and set those donors up for success long-term for your organization, I would invest in those kind of things where you're giving the donor just a surprise and delight moment that they wouldn't have expected from a charity that they support. And then the last thing that organizations that are doing this well do differently is they are less focused on today's results than they are long-term revenue growth. That's not to say that a mid-level program should be considered successful if you're losing revenue or if it's not working. If tactics aren't working for you and they're not raising the revenue you need, you have to be mindful of that. But oftentimes we find that the bigger gains in a mid-level program might come further down the road than 30 days after you send a mailing out or 15 days after you send an email out. So the value in looking at this on an annualized basis rather than what's happening this month or this quarter is really significant for organizations that want to do mid-level fundraising well. So I've already talked about this a little bit, but what are some of the biggest mistakes that we make in this space? One is failing to believe that you need a mid-level and instead moving annual gift donors at a certain threshold right into major gift portfolios for a number of reasons. One, because a lot of these donors don't see themselves as potential major donors, and when you talk to them, they actually would say things like, I'm not that important. I don't need someone to come, have coffee with me or take me out to dinner. That's not why I give. And so, that's an important context. The other is, if you look at a major donor portfolio for any gift officer, let's say they have 10 donors in it, and 9 of those donors can give 6-figure gifts and 1 can give maybe $1,000, I can tell you immediately who the person is that's going to get the lowest priority and probably not going to get engaged well. The next big mistake is suppressing mid-level donors from a direct response program. So in some organizations, there's a belief that, hey, once a donor gives $1,000, they shouldn't get mail anymore, or they shouldn't get email anymore. And that couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, most of the donors that are going to be part of a mid-level program have come on a file through some sort of small dollar gift that might have been made to a direct mail package, a newsletter, an email. And over time, part of their behavior pattern is that's how they prefer to give. So we want to make sure they get a different and elevated experience in those channels. But if you simply turn the spout off and stop talking to these people through the way that they've become accustomed to talking to you through, you're going to end up losing a ton of donors and a ton of revenue. Some organizations are unwilling to invest in the relational aspects of the mid-level, so those sort of surprise and delight moments, or even things like creating a new impact report that might go quarterly to these donors. The idea of adding cost to a program for a lot of organizations is scary, and the problem with that is that if all we're ever doing is asking and trying to sort of squeeze as much out of these donors as possible, we're going to end up alienating more of them, pushing more of them to other organizations to treat them better, and probably never maximizing the kind of impact that they can make for your organization. Another mistake is keeping mid-level donors in a standard annual giving program. So we see that, especially around that $1,000 mark, once we give an organization or a donor, gives at that $1,000 level, many times that's where they start to expect a different engagement with an organization. And think about it from a commercial perspective. If you go out and spend $25 with a company, whatever company you patronize for any service or product, that's a lot different of a decision than if you give that company $1,000 for a higher level product or experience. But when you do that, when you make that more significant investment, your expectation is typically much higher. And the same thing is true with a donor experience. So the organizations that are unwilling to make those additional investments in the stewardship and experience piece, they find it really challenging to engage those donors all over time. And then, like I said, if you're measuring success based on what happened this month with these donors, you're going to be disappointed because you're not going to see the kind of lift and improvement in a month-over-month time frame that you do when you look at it annually. The other thing that organizations do really well with mid-level donors is they blend the art and the science, right? So when I say the science, I'm talking really about the direct response side, because a lot of the heavy lifting on the fundraising side for mid-level programs is done through the mail, through online giving, sometimes through phone engagement, but it really is direct response driven in most organizations. Some smaller organizations that maybe don't do a lot of direct response can do this differently, but I would say the majority of mid-level programs that I've seen in 20 years are anchored in some kind of direct mail or digital or combined program. But what these organizations are doing to really excel and elevate the experience for donors is they're adding what I call the artistic side, the art angle, and that is really pulling some of the experience and engagement strategies that good major gift programs have and bringing those to bear for this audience. So they're not stopping the scientific side, the calculated ask strings, the typical direct response strategy stuff. They're layering on the tactics that a great major gift officer uses, but they're finding ways to do it at scale because if you have a portfolio of 100 donors, it's a lot easier for you to make personal visits and calls. But if you have 2,000 people in your mid-level program, there's no way humanly possible you're going to get to that kind of scale. So it's a blend of the two, and using automated processes and tools to deliver some of those higher level experiences, so that you can have, you can have donors that are giving effectively through your direct response program, but getting a much deeper experience with your organization through those other tactics. Skip the slide there. Sorry. This is really hard to see on this screen, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize it would be so small, but essentially what I've given you here are the 8 keys to mid-level success as we see it. And so that is having a compelling case for support that is bigger and broader and more compelling than what you probably typically ask your donors for. Providing elevated direct response experience. So that's things like making sure that your donors, your direct mail for these donors has handwritten, blue ink on it from time to time. Maybe providing some larger format packages that are more like major gift proposals than they are like direct mail packages. Things like adding in special impact reports and changing your newsletter so that there's a custom version for mid-level donors if you've got enough of them. Using data modeling and segmentation. So the same kind of data modeling that major gift shops use to identify who their best donors are and who they should prioritize for engagement, you can use that same kind of methodology and scoring processes to identify the people who are most likely to upgrade or might be valuable enough to invest even additional resources in to steward them differently than the average donor in your mid-level program. Some organizations are even going as far as starting to talk to donors based on affinity. So they're matching in data about other places that these donors give, and if they can tell that a donor has an affinity for, say, child-focused causes, and they have multiple programs, they might begin talking to this donor about their child-focused program rather than anything else. And some organizations are seeing really good lift in response by being able to do that. You can do that at a lower cost if you are tracking the appeals and the solicitations that your donors give to, and sort of providing a reason code in your database. So if you have 5 different programs and you are soliciting for all those different programs, and you find that one of your mid-level donors only ever gives when you are talking about the program that plants trees to help improve the environment and landscapes that way, rather than recycling or any other program for your organization, then if you start to talk to that donor specifically about what they've shown they're responsive to, it's likely that you'll get higher response rates and more revenue over time from that donor. But you have to have the data in your database to start with in order to be able to do that. We do like to see specific upgrade packages. So at least twice a year, you want to be in front of these donors with a defined upgrade ask. So where you're literally saying to that donor, last year you gave $1,000. We'd really love for you to increase that. And if you could give $1,500 this year, here's what you'd be able to accomplish through us for that additional investment. Excuse me. Many organizations find success with a branded giving society. That's not to say you have to have it in order to launch a mid-level program, but we do find that many donors are interested in associating themselves with something like that, where there's a feel of exclusivity and sort of an elevated experience through that as well. Then there's the personal touch. So that's, are they getting phone calls? If you've got a small enough audience and you've got enough staff, can you do those in-house, or can you deploy volunteers? So one of my good friends, Tom Hooper, he runs an organization called Nimble Connect. And what Nimble Connect does is they help deploy your volunteers in a really strategic way to engage donors over the phone. And they see some great results out of that. So, if you don't have the capacity to do it yourself, somebody like Nimble Connect and Tom could be a really great value add. They're not super expensive, and if they can move the needle on engagement for you and really help build donor value for you, that's a worthwhile investment. The other thing would be personalized video. So there's a couple of companies that I'm familiar with. ViewSpark is one, BombBomb is the other, and what those allow you to do is to deliver personalized video content either to a segment of your donor file, or even, depending on the volume of donors, to the individual. So you could, craft a unique video for every donor in your program potentially. So things like that add personal touch, handwritten cards, delivering cookies, all those kind of things that don't require, you can do at scale, but they feel really personalized, those help to add value. A reduced solicitation schedule. So again, I'm a direct mail guy telling you to reduce your frequency here, so that we should stop and listen to that real quick. With mid-level donors, we often find that when we reduce the frequency, the value per donor goes up. So depending on your frequency, if you mail your donors right now 5 times a year, then reducing it, by an appeal or 2 might not get you the same kind of lift. But if you're mailing 18 or 20 times a year, or even a dozen, and you reduce that contact frequency, that solicitation frequency for donors in the mid-level program, let's say you go from 12 to 6 or 12 to 8, you will likely see that the donors that are in that program retain longer and start to give you bigger gifts over time. Now, it means you have to ask for bigger amounts. You can't continue to ask for the same thing on a reduced frequency and expect those donors to give more. So you've got to, this is where the offer and the sort of case for support with mid-level donors becomes much more critical and much more important. But reducing that solicitation frequency and instead replacing the contacts with stewardship contacts, or cultivation contacts as we refer to them here, will help to drive value over time. So this next slide that I'm going to show you after this is another one of those slides with a lot of content on it, and I apologize, but I think it's important for you to have this all in one place, and that is, what does an optimized program look like? So it looks like dedicated staff. Often it looks like having a branded program or a club name, more sophisticated and in-depth content, probably 4 to 6 really high-touch, highly personalized appeals, which again varies by organization. If you're mailing, a whole lot more than that, cutting it down to 4 to 6 would be really dangerous. And also, if you're mailing 1 appeal a year, going to 6 right out the gate is probably not a good idea. So you have to balance it for the realities of your organization. But the point being, a reduced frequency and a much higher touch experience will add value. Then you also want to have 2 annual upgrade campaigns, and I've got some creative that I'll show you in a few minutes for what we mean when we're talking about these upgrade campaigns. They are often much more involved than a simple letter. Those upgrade campaigns go to all your existing mid-level donors, and at the same time, you want to add 2 annual recruitment campaigns. So what that would be is a mid-level recruitment where you're going lower in your file and you're inviting donors who might have the likelihood to become a mid-level donor to take that step and make a stretch gift to your organization that way. I would recommend at least quarterly phone engagement. Best case scenario would be if you have the capacity, whether through in-house or volunteer or outsource, to call every one of these donors after they make any gift. So, a quarterly engagement call, which is a thank you, here's an update on what's going on in the program and what you made possible. And then from there, any other, if a donor makes 6 gifts, I would love for you to reach out to them 6 times to thank them personally. Again, whether that's an in-house call or an outsource call, you'll see value out of it. Personalized thank you and engagement videos, like we talked about. Some organizations are seeing really good success with what they call teletown halls, or even like group Zoom calls. And really what that does is it typically means that you've got your executive leader, your CEO or whatever, or a program director who is giving a brief update on something that's going on in the organization, and then taking Q&A conversation questions from the audience. And so a lot of big organizations pioneered this a number of years ago. Groups like Operation Smile, World Vision, some of the other kind of mega charities have done this. And now I'm starting to see it happen even with small, local organizations. If you wanted to turn that into a face-to-face opportunity, you could certainly host something at your organization if you got space for it. It's often easier for donors to call in or make the time to do that than to drive to your organization, but either one of them would be an option. We tend to see unique volunteer opportunities that are just for mid-level donors get a lot of engagement from these donors. So many times what we see is that family volunteer opportunities are important to mid-level donors. So when you think about the volunteer opportunities that you have in your organization, Some organizations, whether they're healthcare or they're related to food handling and things like that, some organizations don't typically have volunteer opportunities that they can allow children to be involved in. But if you can create a unique opportunity once or twice a year where you're inviting these mid-level donors and you're inviting them to bring their family along to do volunteer work, those tend to be the highest attended volunteer opportunities that we see in organizations that are doing a mid-level volunteer activity, and they also tend to be the things that those volunteers those donors gravitate to most in a year. And then the other thing would be what I would call an insider email stream. So years ago, when I was working with another agency, World Vision Canada was one of their clients, and the most sought after communication piece was a field update email that came from Dave Boyson, the World Vision Canada CEO, and that was designed to be a really gritty sort of, look like it came right off of his laptop through Outlook. No logos, no branding, nothing, no page wrapper or anything like that on the email. Just super simple. And it was like, hey, I'm in Uganda. Here's what's going on. I wanted you to have an update on the impact that you're making for the ministry, and here's the kind of things that we're doing today because of your support. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Something as simple as that. Because it looked and felt so real, the donors just ate it up, and it was the most sought-after communication piece for that entire donor group. So those are the kind of things that if you really want to be successful in your mid-level program, that you want to be deploying. I talked a little bit about mid-level clubs, and I just want to give you a really brief one-slide case study on this to show you what one of my former clients was able to do when they moved from having sort of an ad hoc approach to mid-level donors to actually focusing it in on a club and thinking through some benefits that they could give their donors that weren't largely tangible. So it's not like they were giving tote bags and mugs and things like that. It was really more of the intangible engagement opportunities. So, excuse me. This Leadership Circle program was designed, I built this for a food bank in the Midwest, and there's 4 levels to it for different gift amount levels, and then you can see kind of how they've scaled the benefits. So this is like live on their website. People can see it and can choose to opt into this program by giving at those levels. And the benefits are things like you're going to get early invitation to our events. You're going to get a special newsletter version from us, all the way up to, if you're giving at certain levels, you'll have an opportunity to visit and meet with our CEO. This organization has, at the time that we built this, had an incredibly dynamic and engaging CEO, and so a lot of donors who were giving at high levels could have been interested in that. What they've seen over the last couple of years is that this program now delivers almost $4 million to their organization annually, and it now represents 45% of all individual annual gifts that they get. So they've seen some significant growth and some huge upside on the revenue simply by focusing in and giving donors a more compelling why to make that leap from giving regular annual gifts to becoming part of a mid-level program. The next couple slides are going to take us into mid-level offers, and I'm recognizing that we don't have a ton of time, so I'm going to go a little bit of fast here just to get you to the best content. When we think about offer development, it's really like building a case for support, right? We want to identify the issue we want to solve, what the need is in the community, and then how we are uniquely qualified to solve that problem. And developing that offer and getting it right becomes the linchpin of being able to really unlock significant giving from mid-level donors. All the other tactics and techniques that you can bring to bear will help create lift, but if you don't have a really compelling set of fundraising offers to put in front of those donors, you'll not see the kind of exponential growth that you could. And just like a major gift case for support, there's 8 things that you need to check the box off on your fundraising offer for mid-level donors in order to be successful. So what's the urgent problem that you're going to solve? What's your solution and why is it unique? What's that solution going to cost? If there's been money raised toward it, so if this is a match opportunity or if you've got another donor who's going to fund part of it, things like that. what are some example components of that solution? So if you're talking to a donor about how you've got to build this new program to help help solve the opioid addiction in your community, that's a really big, broad topic. What are some of the key components of that program that you're going to be doing, and what do those cost? Because you might have a donor who can give $2,500, maybe not $25,000 for the whole program, but they could give $2,500. So what's a palatable piece of the program that they could invest in? Then what are they going to accomplish with that gift? Why is your organization best qualified to solve the problem? And what's the risk in your community to those you serve, and even to the donor potentially, of not acting, not becoming a part of your mid-level program and making that stretch gift to this particular offer? So if you get these pieces right, you will have a really solid offer that you can carry out. And some organizations have one offer, some might have 20. It just depends on the number of programs and quote-unquote products that you can make available to your donors to invest in. So here's a quick example. Again, I'm drawing on some of my background working with a lot of homeless service organizations. In that space, the typical fundraising offer is, something like your gift of $27 will provide 10 meals for hungry, homeless men, women, and children at XYZ organization. Now, if I want to get a donor to make a much more significant gift, I don't necessarily want to say to them, your gift of $1,000 will provide, exponentially more meals. Yes, that accomplishes something, and yes, it's a good thing, but it's just not often as compelling as saying to that same donor, your investment of $1,250 today in the XYZ program will help put a person experiencing homelessness back on a path to life restoration by supporting affordable transitional housing, recovery from substance abuse, one-on-one support, job skills training, and so much more. That is a kind of mid-level offer that can take you from getting $100 checks to $1,000, $5,000, $10,000. We have some clients that we've done this with that have seen, $25,000, $50,000, $80,000 checks coming in off of a mid-level campaign because we had a really compelling, well-developed offer. So that's the value in that. Here's just a really quick case study. All I'm showing you on this slide are the reply devices, but this is one organization that we worked with that they do drug and alcohol recovery, and they have a typical fundraising offer of, can you sponsor a day of recovery? We help them develop a scholarship offer, which is, can you provide a scholarship for someone for the full program, which is an elevated ask and an elevated gift amount. And what they saw by testing this is that the audience that responded to the scholarship program, they gave it a 15% response rate, almost a $300 average gift, and almost a 12-to-1 ROI. So this is really good, and it speaks volumes to the idea that when you can focus in your offer on something much more compelling and something that's bigger for that donor to bite off on, you have a really great opportunity to increase both your revenue and your return. Just stopping real quick here, you'll get this in the slides and you'll get it in the recording, but I've put a link up on my website. You can actually go and grab, I've got a worksheet there that's 3-4 pages that'll walk you through everything you need to do to build a new offer, and it also has some writing prompts for how to craft some language around that too. So it's available for you if you'd like it. The remainder of this session is on creative. So I just want to give you some examples of how mid-level donor creative that is very successful in market is unique. We've talked about this already, but things like handwritten personalization. So you can do that with real handwriting, like a live person actually applying the handwriting, or there are plenty of production vendors across the country that do what's called auto pen. And so they'll take a ballpoint pen and automate the process. It looks just like true handwriting. It is handwriting, and it's significantly cheaper than asking somebody to write it personally by hand. But the ability to put blue ink on paper with live ink is really important and will move the needle for an organization. You can also, some organizations will do full-on handwritten appeals like this, whether it's a handwritten thank you note, which is always impactful, or even a handwritten appeal. That too will drive significant response. We had an organization once that said, this feels crazy to us, but we're willing to try it. They sent a handwritten note like this, just in a note card, to about 1,000 donors and that campaign raised them $500,000 out the gate, and they've done it now multiple times since, and they always raise about the same amount of revenue when they do that. So these kind of tactics have a real potential to move the needle on your revenue. Integrated messaging. So for mid-level donors, really for anybody on your file, but particularly for mid-level donors, if your mail packages and your emails and your social media aren't all in sync, talking the same message at the same time, you're going to have disconnects and you're going to raise less money. So make sure that as you are thinking this through, you're not just thinking about, what does my email need to look like or what does my mailing need to look like, but what's the overall comprehensive experience need to look like, so that when a donor engages with you in any channel, they feel like you're the same organization talking from the same set of notes, rather than, oh, wait a minute, I'm talking to XYZ organization, but I'm only talking to their mail people because their digital people give me a totally different experience. The more integrated you are, the better it'll be for your donors. So, upgrade packages. Proposal, this we're saying is a proposal to increase support. Same as an upgrade package. What you'll see here, it's a 9x12 envelope. It's bright colored. It's got a label with personalized messaging affixed to the outer envelope. Instead of a short, one-page letter, we've actually got 2-page letter. So it's in total, it's 4 pages of content. There's a full-page reply device, so that mimics like a major donor pledge form. And then there's usually an insert of some sort that the donors asked to sign and return or things like that. This is a much more expensive execution than what a lot of organizations are used to doing, but it's also super valuable. So when we mail these for organizations with their mid-level donors, we often get somewhere in the range of 8-to-1 return on investment, all the way up, depending on the audience, to 25-to-1 return on investment. So, for that kind of return, other than sitting, face-to-face in front of somebody over a cup of coffee, it's really hard to get that kind of return anywhere else. So these are well worth their investment. Here's just another example of one of those for a different organization with a different mission. You can see kind of, same sort of approach here. You'll also note that in most of the cases that I'm going to show you here, live stamps are applied. We're huge fans of that, and oftentimes for your best mid-level donors, you want to have even first-class stamps. Some organizations provide first-class stamps on their reply envelopes as well. We've tested it, and depending on the type of donor and the size of their gift, it can be worth it. I would say be careful with it because it's a big investment, but for some of your best mid-level donors, it might be worth it. Here's just another high-value appeal, and what you'll see here on the far right is there's a business card that's paper clipped to the letter there. So again, it mimics that super personalized, like it looks like someone in your office just put this together for them and sent it out. There's personalization all throughout the card and the insert. So the donor name is on that, whereas with most organizations they wouldn't spend the money to do that, and personalize it. But for this audience, you certainly do. Here's another upgrade campaign. So again, very involved, multi-page letter proposal. There's an insert here that ties back to the mission of the organization. These are the kind of things that you want to be putting in front of your mid-level donors, because they're what drives the needle on response for you. An impact report. So annual reports are great. Newsletters are great. But if you can find budget to integrate an impact report 2 to 4 times a year, where it's less content, it's more focused on the donor, and in fact, if you're using certain technology, you can even personalize these impact reports so that you're showing the donor what their specific gifts have done in, say, the last quarter. We see a huge positive response from donors on these. In fact, it's not a fundraising vehicle, but oftentimes you'll get revenue back from donors who are so moved by the impact that you share with them that they've made that they go ahead and respond back with a check. And the same thing with your acknowledgments. This is an acknowledgement letter for a mid-level donor, and this is another one where there's a paper-clipped business card. So we're telling the donor in this letter, this is your person. This is your contact at our organization. If you have questions, if you have any issues with your giving or challenges, please reach out to this person, and giving them that direct connection to the organization, which is really meaningful for those donors. That, again, it reinforces that you see them as more than just one of many, and you see them as one of your closest supporters, and that tends to drive retention there. Steve, I will pause and let you open up for questions. I know we're probably running a little tight, but I'm happy to stay on.
No problem. Well, thanks, Andrew. Lots of great info there. I love all those examples toward the end. Awesome info. No worries on taking your time because you had a lot of good info to share. So thanks. We do have some questions. Probably won't get to all of them, but I'm gonna flash your contact information up here real quick, Andrew, if that's okay, while we go through some of these.
Yeah, go for it.
We had more of an observation kind of comment, but I'm going to turn it into a question. Someone in the chat kind of noted that a lot of your advice sort of reminded them of a lot of the advice that they see for major gift officers as well. Do you think there's a pretty big similarity there between major gifts and mid-level? And if not, what do you think kind of the differences are?
Yeah, if you do this right, there's a lot of crossover.
Cool.
The difference is that you know, because mid-level audiences are going to be larger, there are just far fewer people that can give, say, $10,000 or above checks, which are your major donors. Because your mid-level is larger, you have to find ways to do this work at scale. So, you know, that's where you want to blend the direct mail, the direct response tactics with some of those other high-touch major gift tactics, but you want to find ways to do it through automated processes so that you don't have to have 5 staff members that are dedicated to mid-level. The metrics don't work at that point. But if you've got one person, say, dedicated to it, who has many tools that look and feel customized to the donor, but allows them to send out, 1,000 of something or 500 of something and not have to handwrite all of them themselves or have to make all those calls themselves in a short period of time, that's where you get value from the scalability. But yes, the sort of the art side of this business on mid-level is very similar to major gifts.
Cool. I love it. Here's one from Eileen. Do you think that the mid-level donor program should be branded as such externally, or would you only use it kind of as an internal term? So I'm thinking of naming your sustainer program. Would you also name your mid-level program and refer to your donors with that verbiage, or should it only be an internal kind of
I would
moniker?
not name it. I would not call it mid-level. But many organizations find success doing things like leadership circle or president's council or things like that.
Okay. Cool. I love it. Well, I'm going to roll through these kind of quickly. Here's one from Christina. Looks like they're mailing their mid-level donors twice a year. Do you think they should increase that frequency? Do you think there's kind of a sweet spot for the amount of mailings this little cohort of donors is getting, or does it kind of vary?
So the answer to that is going to be it depends.
Yeah.
I will tell you that you will raise more money if you mail them more.
Okay.
But if you're, and I assume she means that she's soliciting them twice a year. If you've got a quarterly newsletter and, say, a quarterly impact report, or you're calling them quarterly or something like that, then it might be enough engagement. I think what she'd need to do is probably look at the data and figure out what the total contact cadence looks like. And then, depending on the size of the audience, I might test. So I might take half of them and send another appeal in the year and see how they behave. And if you get a lot of complaints or you get more people opting out, then don't move forward with it. But if you get a bunch of revenue and you get only a handful of complaints and frustration, then you could start to scale up your frequency.
Cool. Yeah, I guess you never really know until you test it, right? I love it.
Yep.
Well, it's about 3 o'clock. I know there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, but Andrew, can people reach out to you maybe by email if we didn't get to their question? Is that cool?
They can absolutely do that, and even if you want to send me the questions, I'm happy to respond to them and send them back.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you a chat transcript because there's some good ones in here, and I don't want to not do them justice by only going for a 10-second answer. So, man, this was great. This was awesome. I love this topic. Like I said, I don't think enough people are talking about it, so I'm so thankful that we've got a nice mid-level presentation here in the can. So thank you, Andrew. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. This was fun for me too. And again, anybody want to reach out, go for it. If you want to grab that mid-level offer development worksheet off my site, you can easily do that too.
Awesome. Yeah, do reach out to Andrew. He's obviously a wealth of knowledge and good Twitter follower. If you're a Twitter person, give him a follow there too. I'll send a link out to that worksheet there in the chat so you all can all see it. So we'll call it a day there. Thanks to all of you for hanging out for an hour or so. We always love to see a full room. We've got a great session coming up next week. Like I said, every week, special Wednesday session. I'm going to be out of town on Thursday, so our buddy Linda was nice enough to accommodate us for a Wednesday session. She's going to be talking about how to advance in your nonprofit career. So maybe if you're struggling with upward mobility or maybe increasing your income, join us for this session. Linda has been in the sector a long time. She's been doing this a long time. She is awesome, and it's always a great presentation from her. I think she's done more Bloomerang webinars than anyone, actually. So join us if you're free next Wednesday, 2 o'clock in the Eastern time zone. If not, we've got a lot of other sessions on our webinar page, actually already scheduled out through next February. I can hardly believe it, but there's lots of really cool topics coming up, and hopefully you'll find something that you are interested in. So look for an email from me with the recording and the slides later on this afternoon. I'll get that to you, I promise. And hopefully we'll see you again next week. So have a good rest of your Thursday. Have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.